A few months ago, I made a video about how the MVP award gradually became broken and how it's impossible to predict since voters are changing the goalposts from year to year. So, in an absolute contradiction to myself, I'm going to try and predict what I think the final MVP ladder is going to look like at the end of this upcoming season. Like I said in my last video, a lot more goes into the MVP than just individual performance. Depending on the year, team record and narrative can play just as or even more important factors in determining who is worthy of winning. I'm going to try and take all that into consideration and figure out who is most likely to come away with the award. Starting off with the honorable mentions, despite being seen as a potential candidate in the eyes of Vegas, I don't think any of these three realistically end up being a true contender for the award by the time the season is over. Starting with Stephen Curry, I think last year showed that the regular season really doesn't matter at all anymore to Golden State. Clay was out until January, and the game he was supposed to return, Draymond went down with a back issue and missed about 2 months. Once he finally came back, Curry went down with a foot injury and missed the rest of the regular season. Despite only playing about 15 minutes of regular season basketball together, Steph, Clay, and Draymond did just fine once the postseason rolled around and won it all. With that and the fact that he'll be turning 35 in March, I think both Steph and Steve Kerr are going to focus more on staying healthy and getting through the season instead of playoff positioning. This means that their record won't be anything crazy, and his stats will probably be about as modest as they were last year for Curry standards. So the lack of team record and average numbers will end up keeping him out of MVP conversations. Next, we have Kevin Durant. It seems like people forgot that KD had the Nets as the 1 seed in the East and spent some time at the top of the MVP ladder during the first couple months of last season. Of course, the midseason injury derailed their season and eventually their roster makeup as it caused Harden to want out. They ended up getting swept by the Celtics. He demanded a trade and is somehow still in Brooklyn. I just feel like the whole idea of him being brought back despite wanting out is very reminiscent of Kobe's 2008 MVP season, where he helped right the ship for LA and restore his image in the eyes of Laker fans by leading them to the top seed in the West. If all goes right in Brooklyn, they certainly can end up being number 1 in the East, which would give him a real shot at winning the award. But I really don't trust KD and Kyrie to put together a full healthy season knowing their injury history. So I would give him a puncher's chance, but still think it's pretty unlikely. Finally, we have the back-to-back reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic. It may sound crazy to say, but I don't think there's any chance that he walks away with the award this year. To lay out some historical significance, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and Larry Bird are the only players in NBA history who have three-peated the MVP. With the amount of backlash voters got for naming him the winner over Embiid last season, there is just simply no way they make him the first player in almost 40 years to win it 3 straight times. On top of that, he will have much more help this season since Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are back, which means his numbers shouldn't look quite as high as they were in 2022. Even if Denver is better than promoted and ends up finishing the season with the best record in the league, I still think voters find a way to make sure that the Joker doesn't get his historical 3rd straight MVP. I have to include him in this video because, like I said, he is the reigning MVP, but he's going to have to put up Wilt numbers in order to beat the inevitable voter fatigue. Moving on to the true contenders. I think all of these guys have a realistic shot to win it, but there's a clear pecking order from least to most likely. Starting at number 5, we have Jayson Tatum. He showed during the back half of last season that he has what it takes to put together an MVP-worthy campaign. In the last 40 games of the regular season, he put up 28 points a night while drastically improving his shooting splits and spearheading a historically good Boston defense. Only problem is that he's consistently had an issue over the years of getting off to super slow starts. In 2020, 2021, and 2022, it's taken a while for Tatum to get his legs under him and for his jumper to consistently fall. Then, around the halfway mark of the year, he turns into a knockdown shooter and legitimately looks like a top 5 player in the league.
When I get a cut, I think I'm top 5. Top 5 what? Top 5.
But in order for him to win an MVP, he'll have to play with more confidence from the jump and avoid the streaky tendencies of his past, because that's one of the only things holding him back from winning it. On paper, Boston is one of the best teams in the league and is currently the betting favorite to win it all. So it's not unrealistic at all to think that they're going to end up with either the 1st or the 2nd seed. The team record aspect should already be in his favor. In terms of narrative, playing in the massive Boston market and trying to finally get his team over the hump after coming so close last year is going to be a talking point all year long. So that checks out as well. The 2 biggest questions are if he can put together a consistent season of superstar play, and even if he does, will that production match the rest of the guys on this list? Well, I think he's going to have numbers that definitely put him in the conversation. I'm not so sure he's going to put up stats quite as eye-popping as the other 4 ahead of him. Many felt that Joel Embiid was robbed of the MVP last season after he won the scoring title and led the Sixers to a better record than the Nuggets despite playing in a drama-ridden locker room. Unfortunately for him, I think it's going to be even harder to make a proper argument for him at the end of this season. For starters, it looks like Tyrese Maxey is going to take another leap this season, and James Harden should be at least a little bit better from what we saw from him in Philly thus far. With Maxey's increased role and Harden's expected bounce back, I think that's going to mean a few less shots for Embiid and likely means he won't end up scoring 30 points a game again. Regarding team record, despite his improved play from teammates, I think that Philly is still the 3rd best team in the East behind Boston and Milwaukee. With 2 MVP candidates already on the Celtics and Bucks, it's going to be hard to use team record as a real argument for him this upcoming season. However, there's a good chance he gets the benefit of the doubt from voters, which is definitely worth noting. Each of the last 2 seasons, he's finished second in MVP voting behind Jokic. If Philly can overachieve a bit and at least be within striking distance of a top seed, I think there's a realistic chance that Embiid finally gets the benefit of the doubt and takes home the award. It just depends on how much of a dip his stats inevitably take. For the 3rd straight year, Luka Doncic has entered the season as a betting favorite to win MVP. And also for the 3rd straight year, I think he's going to come up just short. It has nothing to do with the incredible numbers that he's going to put up. Unfortunately, I think the situation that his team is currently in will end up preventing him from being able to get the award. Unlike the rest of the guys on this list who are either on a true contender or on the cusp of taking a big leap, the Mavericks are kind of stuck in the middle. Even though they made a conference finals run last season, they lost a key piece in Jalen Brunson and didn't do much to replace him. Because of that, I would expect them to finish somewhere in the 4 to 6 range like they've been in the last few seasons. Unless your team is dealing with a major injury or you do something historic like average a triple-double, it's really hard to win the award in a spot like this, especially after a deep playoff run the year prior. This middle of the ground position is going to cause voters to end up looking the other way in favor of others who are on teams trending in a positive direction. But in terms of narrative, this means that if he can get his team to overachieve and finish towards the top of the West, it'll be hard to deny him for MVP because of the near 30-point triple-double he averages every single year. But I think this roster around him is more of a lottery team that he drags to the middle of the standings rather than a solid team that he turns into a real contender. So until Mark Cuban puts some pieces around Luka that make the Mavs a legitimate threat, he's going to be stuck in this middle spot for the foreseeable future. I know this might be a bit of a bold take, but I really think Zion Williamson is due for an absolute monster season, which will end up placing him second in MVP voting. The last time we saw Zion, he was sharing the court with guys like Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams clogging up the lane for him. And what did he do? He averaged 27 a game on a record 61% shooting from the field. That's something Shaq never even did. Now, he's coming back to a much improved roster with a big man that can space the floor in Jonas Valanciunas and CJ McCollum, who's already an elite shooter himself. With these new weapons around him, I can't even imagine what kind of numbers Zion is going to put up with the paint being that much more open for him. And regarding his team, the Pelicans don't have to be a top 2 or 3 seed like the rest of the guys on this list in order for voters to view him as a legitimate candidate. Last year, New Orleans went just 36-46, but after winning the play-in tournament and sneaking into the playoffs as an 8 seed, they showed the world that they figured something out as they took the top-seeded Suns to 6 very competitive games. Now, this may be a little bit ambitious, but I think adding a healthy Zion Williamson to this roster can be enough to propel this team to north of 50 wins. Combine that with the monstrous numbers he's bound to put up with a wide open paint, and I think he could have an extremely strong case for the award. But there's still one more guy who I'm very confident will end up taking home the award in April. At my number 1 spot, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know it isn't too wild of a pick, but I think there's just too much going for him not to win the award in 2023. For starters, he's clearly the best player in the league in my opinion. Giannis is one of, if not the best defender in the league, as he can cover an absurd amount of ground in both transition and half-court settings, and he's greatly improved as a playmaker as well. But what we learned after he went up against the Celtics last season is that there's not a single defense that can stop him in any way, shape, or form. There was no team better equipped to guard Giannis over the course of a series, as Grant Williams and Al Horford are 2 of the best when it comes to matching up against him. Despite that, he put up 34, 15, and 7. Absolutely insane. So with his ability to get 30 in his sleep using brute force, generational defense, and improved playmaking, I think it's hard to find someone you can confidently put over him at this point in his career. Moving on to team record, the trio of Giannis, Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday is a proven recipe for success. Even with Brook Lopez essentially missing the entire season last year, Milwaukee still managed to win 51 games. So barring any long-term injuries, I would expect that number to definitely increase this upcoming season. And finally, for narrative, Giannis is quite simply due for his 3rd MVP award. While Jokic was a deserving candidate each of the last 2 seasons, the fact that he's won 2 straight essentially eliminates him from contention, as I already mentioned. And the fact that Giannis is so much better now compared to the 2 years he won MVP, voters are going to be quick to choose him as the safe pick to try and avoid any more criticism like they got last year. The guaranteed incredible stats, the very likely great team record, and the voters getting over their fatigue is why I think he ends up this year as the MVP. So to wrap it up, my list from 5 to 1 goes Jayson Tatum, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Zion Williamson, and Giannis. But now I want to hear your guys' thoughts. How do you think my list looks? And who do you think is going to win MVP this season? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.